Hello and welcome back to my second video on retcons and my giving examples of retcons done right. As we saw in the first video, we were talking about Captain America and how in 1971 approximately they reintroduced some stories that at that time were not in canon, they were completely ignored at that time, from the 1950s, going as far as using the specific panels and specific pages from those old comic books, and they put them into continuity by changing the story a little bit so that it fits what was at that time current continuity. We're going to continue today with another great example of a retcon done during the late 2000s and early 2010s. We're going to be talking about Grant Morrison's great run on Batman. So, Batman, along with Superman, was one of the few heroes that stayed in print all the time from the Golden Age all the way during the 1950s, where most of the superhero comic books were cancelled and they were replaced by horror, sci-fi, romance comics. And a lot of Batman and Superman stories from that time, they are considered today to be a little bit too silly and they are not in canon. But what Grant Morrison did was great, in my opinion. I'm gonna be giving the example from this collected volume called the Black Casebook, which is the stories that Grant Morrison took and put them into continuity 50 to 60 years later than they were printed. Most of the Batman writers preferred to ignore these stories. They consider them campy, silly, or whatever, or too sci-fi for Batman. But Grant Morrison found a great way to put some of these stories back into canon. So this volume collects around a dozen stories. Bear in mind that during the 50s and I think all the way up to the early Silver Age, comic books had a lot more pages than they have today, and they featured 2 or 3 or 4 stories in them. So you would get a volume of DC Comics, of Detective Comics, and they would have like 3 or 4 Batman stories in them. So it's really hard for someone to read all of them and pick and choose the right ones. So here we have stories where, as you'll see, if you are familiar with the Batman Rest in Peace storyline, this is just before that, Batman and Son, where first of all Batman meets, as the story is called, the Batman of all nations. So basically it's some 1950s heroes. They don't have bat suits or anything, that come from different countries. So there is a French superhero, and an English superhero, an Australian one, an Italian one, and one from Argentina, if I remember correctly. So they all form a club of superheroes, because all of them are inspired by Batman. There is even a Western tale. Westerns were also very popular at that time, where there is an Indian chief that he has a secret identity called Man of Bats, also inspired by Batman, and Batman fights alongside him. There is the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh story, which is very important for the Grant Morrison run, which is basically a fantasy story where Batman gets transferred to a planet where he has Superman powers. And there is, as Grant Morrison retconned it, the first appearance of Dr. Hurt. And he is the doctor which experiments on Batman while he's volunteering to do an isolation trial and isolation experiment. So Grant Morrison took all these stupid, campy stories and found that some of them had depth, as is a story where Batman faces his worst nightmare, which is Robin's death and him not being able to do anything. And some of them maybe didn't have a deeper meaning, but they could also be used with a little bit of goodwill in his current Batman run. And along with Damian, Batman's son from his affair with Talia al Ghul, he wrote this great storyline. Look at these pages where they have like flashbacks or memories to 12 years ago when supposedly those old storylines happened, those old golden age, we will call them storylines, and they are done in a style reminiscent of that time. And not only that, if you're familiar with the storyline or with Grant Morrison's run, the material he uses from these old stories is very, very intertwined in his storytelling. The Club of Heroes maybe sets it off, but this idea of the Club of Heroes, I'm not gonna be giving too many spoilers on the Batman run from 10 years ago, although you should have read it already by now. Is actually the idea from for where Grant Morrison takes Batman to, which is Batman Inc. Incorporated. So, in my opinion, this is my final thought on the matter, and this is why I am giving these examples of these retcons done right. If a writer really cares about the character, okay, like Batman maybe is one of the most popular characters, so is Captain America, but even a second or third rate character, go back and please read the old stories. Maybe they are not very popular today, maybe they look silly, but that is the reason why this character exists. There have been probably thousands of superheroes created by different authors. Most of them are not around today, and I'm talking about they're not in publication today. The reason behind why some heroes are still popular is, in my opinion, rooted in their old stories. There must be something there in the mythos, in the character. Like Grant Morrison, if you've read his book, he explains it better than I will ever do. But there is something behind these heroes that keep them popular. And it doesn't have to do with them being modern or something like that. It is something that is beyond the time they were written. If they were popular only because they were written, they were current at the time they were first introduced, then they would have faded away already. So this is my suggestion for the hundreds and thousands of retcons. Please, if you don't like the original material, please create something new. Don't go around changing the heroes to make them current in whatever year it is. The reason why they're around for 80, 50, 30 years is not their fashionability or them being trendy at that time. It's something that is much more deep than that. And with this thought, I am leaving you, and I will be back with more videos and more reviews. Thank you very much. Bye bye.